The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. It floated in space, far from any star. A neutral ground where 47 different species came together to discuss the future of civilization. The walls were made of crystal that showed the stars outside. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top ambassador. Samuel Hart had stood in this chamber for 15 years. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had given his life to the council, believing that different species could work together in peace. His father had been an ambassador before him, and his grandfather before that. For 300 years, the Hart family had served humanity in this place. Today would be the last day. Samuel looked around the chamber at the representatives of all the species humanity had worked with. The Volari sat in their section, their purple scales catching the light. They were proud and ambitious, always pushing for more territory and more power. The Cathari were there too, their forearms folded across their chests. Humanity had saved the Cathari from extinction 60 years ago when a disease threatened to wipe them out. Human doctors had worked day and night for months to find a cure. The Zorvons floated in their water tanks, their jellyfish-like bodies pulsing with soft light. Human engineers had helped them build the first ships that could carry their water-filled bodies across space. The Mycelian Collective sent their representatives, fungal beings who communicated through chemical signals. Human agricultural scientists had saved their food supply 3 times in the past century. All of them had gathered today to vote on the Volari. Proposal Katie Price stood behind Samuel, holding a tablet with notes she had prepared. She was young, only 28, with brown hair pulled back in a simple style. This was her first year as an ambassador's aide, and she had been so excited to serve. She believed in the council's mission with all her heart. Now she watched with growing horror as species after species cast their vote against humanity. The Volari's proposal was simple but cruel. It would restrict human trade routes, preventing human merchants from accessing half of the known galaxy. It would limit human colonies to a small region of space, stopping their expansion completely. It would impose cultural sanctions, banning human music, art, and literature from council worlds. The proposal called these measures necessary to prevent human domination of the galaxy. Samuel almost laughed at that last part. Humans had never tried to dominate anyone. They had spent 3 centuries helping other species, asking for nothing in return except friendship and fair trade. They had shared their technology freely. They had sent doctors and engineers to any world that asked for help. They had mediated conflicts between species who would have destroyed each other otherwise. "Hi," Councillor Zethman of the Volari called for the final vote count. His voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and satisfied. He had worked for years to build this coalition against humanity. He saw humans as a threat, not because they were aggressive, but because they were too helpful. Other species liked humans too much. They trusted humans too easily. This gave humanity too much influence, and Zethman could not allow that to continue. The vote was close but clear. 26 species voted in favor of the proposal. 21 voted against it. Humanity was not allowed to vote on matters concerning themselves. Katie felt tears forming in her eyes. She looked at the Cathari delegation, the people humanity had saved from extinction. They had voted yes. She looked at the Mycelians, whose food supply depended on human agricultural support. They had voted yes. She looked at the Zorvons, whose entire space program existed because of human help. They had voted yes. Samuel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. His face showed no anger, no bitterness. He had known this day might come. His father had warned him that gratitude was a short-lived emotion, and that fear of the different would always return eventually. The chamber fell silent as Samuel rose from his seat. Every eye and sensor turned toward him. They expected anger. They expected threats. They expected humans to fight back, to argue, to demand justice. Samuel simply smiled, a sad and tired smile. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice calm and steady. "For 300 years, humanity has been honored to serve alongside you. We have asked for nothing except mutual respect and the opportunity to help build a better future for all species. He paused and looked around the chamber one more time, memorizing every face. You have made your choice today. You have decided that humanity is a threat to be contained rather than a friend to be trusted. We respect your right to make that decision, even though we disagree with it. Zethman shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the human's calm response. Therefore, Samuel continued, humanity officially withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We will remove all human personnel, ships, and installations from Council space within 90 days. We wish you well in all your future endeavors. He nodded once, turned, and walked toward the exit. Katie followed him, still fighting her tears. The rest of the human delegation rose and followed silently. There were no dramatic speeches, no warnings of consequences, no threats of revenge. Just a quiet departure. As if humans were simply leaving a party that had gone on too long, Zethman watched them go, his satisfaction growing with each step they took. This was easier than he had expected. The humans were too soft, too gentle. They did not know how to fight for themselves. Without them, the Valari Dominion would finally be able to expand as it deserved. In the corridor outside the chamber, Katie finally let her tears fall. How could they do this to us? After everything we did for them? Samuel put his arm around her shoulders as they walked. People forget, Katie. They forget the help they received. They only remember the fear they feel. It is not their fault, not entirely. Fear is a powerful thing, but what will happen to us now? We will go home, Samuel said simply. We will take care of our own people. We will build our own future. And we will wait. Wait for what? Samuel did not answer that question. He just smiled again, that same sad and tired smile, and kept walking toward the human ships. Within a week, the evacuation began. Human doctors packed up their medical equipment and left the hospitals they had built on a dozen worlds. Human engineers shut down the projects they had been working on and took their blueprints with them. Human teachers said goodbye to their alien students. Human merchants closed their shops and loaded their goods onto departing ships. The council watched the humans leave with a mixture of relief and curiosity. Some species celebrated openly. The humans had always made them feel inferior somehow, always so eager to help, always so capable. It was exhausting to stand next to a species that never seemed to fail at anything. Others watched in silence, strange feeling growing in their hearts. It was a feeling they did not recognize because they had never experienced it. Before, it was the first small seed of regret, but by the time that seed would grow into something they could understand, it would be far too late. 6 months passed after the last human ship crossed the border into human space. At first, the Galactic Council celebrated their newfound freedom. Speeches were given about a new era of independence. Festivals were held on a dozen worlds. The Valari Dominion began planning their expansion into territories they'd long wanted to claim. Then the problems started. On the 12 worlds of the Mycelian Collective, the great fungal farms began to fail. For 60 years, human agricultural scientists had worked with the Mycelians to improve their crop yields. They had developed special fertilizers that worked with the unique biology of mycelian plants. They had designed rotation systems that kept the soil healthy. They had created monitoring systems that caught problems before they became disasters. When the humans left, they took all of this knowledge with them. The Mycelians had never bothered to learn the techniques themselves. Why would they? The humans were always there to help, always happy to solve any problem. The Mycelians had simply expected this to continue forever. Now, standing in fields of dying crops, they realized their mistake. Chief Grower Meltek walked through what had once been the most productive farm on the Mycelian homeworld. The fungal stalks that should have stood tall and healthy were instead withered and brown. The smell of rot filled the air. Beside him, his assistant Verona recorded the damage on a tablet. "How bad is it?" Meltek asked, though he already knew the answer. "Production is down 62% across all 12 worlds," Vorna replied. "At current rates, we will run out of food reserves within 8 months. Can we contact the humans? Ask them for help?" Verona shook her head, her fungal tendrils waving with the motion. "I already tried. The human border stations are not accepting communications from Council species. They say humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs and wishes to be left alone. Meltek felt something cold growing in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling as fear. Then we must find another solution. But there was no other solution. The Mycelians had no agricultural scientists of their own. They had always relied on the humans. Within 3 months, the first famines began. Within 6 months, millions of Mycelians were dead. Far across the galaxy, the Cathari faced a different disaster. It started in a small village on their second-largest colony world. A child became sick with a fever that would not break. Then another child fell ill, and another. Within a week, the entire village was infected. Within a month, the disease had spread to every continent on the planet. Dr. Hextall worked in the largest hospital on the Cathari homeworld. She had trained under human doctors for 10 years and considered them the greatest healers in the galaxy. When the plague reports started coming in, her first instinct was to call her human colleagues for advice. But there were no human colleagues anymore. The human doctors had all gone home, taking their medical databases and research with them. We need to analyze the disease ourselves, Hextall told her staff. We need to develop our own treatment. But the Cathari had never developed their own advanced medical research program. For 60 years, they had simply used human medicines and human techniques. Their own research facilities were basic and outdated. They did not have the equipment or the knowledge to fight a new disease. Hextall spent desperate nights trying to reach the human medical network. She sent message after message to the human border stations. Each time she received the same polite response from a young human named Danny Morrison. "I understand your situation is difficult, Ambassador," Danny said during one transmission. "But humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs. We are not accepting requests for assistance from Council species at this time. People are dying," Hextall pleaded. "Children are dying. Surely you cannot ignore that." Danny's face remained calm and professional, but something flickered in his eyes. The Cathari voted in favor of the proposal that drove humanity away. Your council decided they did not need us anymore. We are simply respecting that decision. We made a mistake. We know that now. Please, help us. "I am sorry," Danny said. "I truly am. But my orders are clear." "Good luck, Doctor." The transmission ended. Hextall sat alone in her office and wept. Within a year, the Cathari plague had killed 2 billion people. It continued to spread to other worlds, carried by refugees fleeing the death behind them. The Zorvons faced, perhaps, the most terrifying crisis of all. Their star was dying. This was not unusual in the universe. Stars died all the time. What made the Zorvan situation special was that human astronomers had discovered the problem 50 years ago and had immediately begun working on a solution. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Human engineers would build a massive array of satellites around the Zorvan star. These satellites would inject carefully calculated amounts of energy into the star's core, stabilizing the fusion reactions, extending the star's life by millions of years. The project was halfway complete when humanity withdrew from the council. The human engineers packed up their equipment and left. The satellites they had already built floated uselessly in space. The blueprints for the remaining work were locked in human databases that no one else could access. Prime Minister Galoth floated in his water tank and stared at the latest scientific reports. The star was dying faster than predicted. Without the human stabilization array, it would collapse within 20 years. Every Zorvan would die. Their entire species would be wiped out. "Can we finish the project ourselves?" he asked his science advisor. "No," came the honest answer. "We do not understand the human technology. We do not have the manufacturing capability to build the remaining satellites. We do not even understand the mathematics behind the design. The humans developed this over decades of research. We cannot recreate it in 20 years. Then contact the humans. Beg them, if necessary." But the humans did not respond to Zorvan messages. They did not respond to any messages from any council species. Their border was closed, their communications silent. Across the galaxy, the same pattern repeated itself. Species that had relied on human help for generations suddenly found themselves alone. The Universal Translator Network began to fail because no one knew how to maintain the human-designed systems. Trade routes collapsed because human merchant ships had served as neutral carriers trusted by all sides. Disputes that human diplomats had managed for decades erupted into open conflict. High Counselor Zethman watched the chaos spread from his office on the Valari homeworld. Reports came in every hour, each one worse than the last. The Mycelians were starving. The Cathari were dying of plague. The Zorvons faced extinction. 3 wars had broken out in the outer sectors. Pirate attacks had increased by 400%. His aide Dexon stood nearby, waiting nervously for orders. "What's this possible?" Zethman demanded. "How could one species have done so much? How could their departure cause so much destruction?" Dexon hesitated before answering. "The humans never made their contributions obvious, Counselor. They never asked for credit or recognition. They simply solved problems quietly and moved on to the next one. We never realized how many problems they were solving." Zethman slammed his claw against his desk. "Find a way to contact them. Offer them anything they want. Promise them anything." "I have tried, Counselor. They are not responding to any of our messages." "Then send a ship to their border. Send a delegation. Send 100 delegations if necessary." But no ships were sent. The Valari were too busy fighting their own wars, dealing with their own problems. The chaos they had helped create was consuming them along with everyone else. In the darkness of space, the human worlds remained quiet and peaceful. They had everything they needed. They had food, medicine, technology, and each other. They watched the chaos unfolding in council space through their long-range sensors. But they did not interfere. Ambassador Samuel Hart, now retired to a small house by a lake on Earth, received regular updates from the human government. He read them quietly each morning, then set them aside and went fishing. "They will call for us eventually," he told his daughter when she asked what would happen. "They always do. The question is whether they will call in time." His daughter looked at him with concern. "And will we help them? After what they did?" Samuel smiled, the same sad smile he had worn in the council chamber on his last day. "We will help them. We always do. That is who we are, even though they hurt us. Especially because they hurt us. Anyone can be kind to friends. The true test is being kind to those who have wronged you." His daughter did not fully understand. But one day she would. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council existed in name only. The Great Chamber still floated in space, but no one came to it anymore. The crystal walls that had once shown the beauty of distant stars now looked out on a galaxy burning with war and suffering. The Valari Dominion had expanded exactly as High Counselor Zethman had planned. Within 3 months of the human departure, Valari fleets had moved into 12 neutral systems. They claimed these territories were necessary for Valari security. They promised that their expansion would bring order and prosperity to the region, instead brought war. The Prothean Assembly watched the Valari expansion with growing alarm. The Protheans were an ancient species, slow to act but powerful when roused. For 300 years, human diplomats had carefully managed the relationship between the Protheans and the Valari. Small disputes had been resolved before they could grow into larger conflicts. Trade agreements had been negotiated to benefit both sides. Cultural exchanges had built trust between the two peoples. Without human mediators, old tensions returned immediately. The Protheans saw the Valari expansion as a threat to their own territories. They demanded that the Valari withdraw from 3 systems that bordered Prothean space. The Valari refused. The first shots were fired 6 months after humanity left. Within a week, the Prothean-Valari War had spread across 40 star systems. But this was only the beginning. The 9th Hive, insectoid species from the galaxy's edge, saw the chaos as an opportunity. They had always wanted to expand their territory, but had been held back by the threat of human intervention. Now, with the humans gone and the major powers fighting each other, nothing stood in their way. 9th Hive swarm fleets poured into the vulnerable neutral zones. They consumed everything in their path, stripping planets of resources and leaving behind only dead rocks. Refugee ships fled in every direction, carrying survivors from a dozen destroyed colonies. The Free Worlds Coalition, a loose alliance of smaller species, tried to organize a defense against the Ninth Hive, but without human military advisors to coordinate their efforts. Their fleets fought as individual units rather than a unified force. The Ninth Hive picked them apart one by one in his darkened office on the Valari homeworld. Counselor Zethman reviewed the latest casualty reports. His purple scales had lost their shine. His eyes were hollow with exhaustion. He had not slept properly in months. 43 million dead, his aide Dexon reported, reading from his tablet. That is just our losses in the Prothean War. The numbers from the Ninth Hive attacks are still being calculated. And the plague? Spreading. It has now reached 17 worlds. We lost contact with the colony on Velthor 3 yesterday. We believe everyone there is dead. Zethman closed his eyes. The Cathari plague had been contained to Cathari space for months, but refugee ships had carried it across the galaxy. Now it was killing Valari, Zorvans, and members of a dozen other species. No one had a cure because no one had the medical knowledge that the humans had taken with them when they left. The translator network? Zethman asked. Failing in 6 more sectors? We cannot communicate with our own fleets in some regions. Orders are being misunderstood. Ships are firing on allies because they cannot identify each other. Zethman opened his eyes and looked at Dexon directly. How did we not see this? How did we not understand what the humans were doing? Dexon hesitated before answering. He had been studying the historical records, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. What he had learned filled him with shame. The humans never told us what they were doing, Nexon said slowly. They never asked for recognition or praise. When a problem was solved, they simply moved on to the next one. We assumed that things worked because they were supposed to work. We did not realize that things worked because humans were making them work. Give me an example. Dexon pulled up a file on his tablet. The translator network. We thought it was an automatic system, built once and left to run forever. In truth, human linguists worked constantly to update it. Every time a new dialect emerged, every time slang changed, every time a species developed new concepts that needed words, human linguists added these to the system. There were over 2,000 humans working full-time on translator maintenance. 2,000. Zethman was shocked. For a system we thought ran itself? Yes, counselor. And that is just one example. Human agricultural scientists visited every farming world twice a year to check soil health and update techniques. Human doctors held conferences every month to share new medical discoveries with every species. Human engineers maintained the navigation beacons that kept our ships from crashing into each other in hyperspace. Zethman felt sick. We drove away the only people who were holding everything together. Yes, counselor. We did. Far from the Valari homeworld, in the depths of dying mycelian space, the last survivors huddled in underground shelters. The farms above them had failed completely. The surface was covered with rotting crops and the bodies of those who had starved. Chief. Grower Meltek sat in a small room with the remaining leaders of his people. They numbered fewer than 50. A year ago, there had been 12 billion mycelians. Now, there were perhaps 10 million left, scattered across a handful of hidden shelters. We have food for 3 more months, Vorana reported. After that, we will have nothing. Have we heard from anyone? Meltek asked. Any species willing to help? Everyone is dealing with their own crisis. The Valari are at war. The Cathari are dying of plague. The Zorvans are preparing for the death of their star. No one has resources to spare. A young mycelian in the corner spoke up. Her name was Senra, and she had been a student before the collapse. What about the humans? Have we tried contacting them again? Many times, Meltak answered. They do not respond. Maybe we should send someone in person. Maybe they would listen if we went to them directly. The other leaders exchanged glances. It was a desperate idea, but they were desperate people. We barely have fuel for such a journey, Vorna pointed out. and the space between here and human territory is controlled by pirates and Ninth Hive swarms. Then we die here, Senra said simply. Or we die trying to reach the only people who might help us. I know which death I prefer. Meltek looked at the young Mycelian with new respect. She was right. There was no hope here. Their only chance, however small, lay with the species they had betrayed. Prepare a ship, he ordered. We will send a delegation to the human border. We will beg if we must. We will offer anything they want. But we will not sit here and wait to die. The other leaders nodded in agreement. It was their only hope. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On world after world, survivors of collapsed civilizations looked toward human space and wondered if the humans would ever forgive them. They remembered the kindness they had taken for granted. They remembered the help they had never appreciated. They remembered the quiet, steady presence of human advisors, doctors, engineers, and diplomats who had asked for nothing in return. Most of all, they remembered the vote. They remembered raising their hands against the species that had saved them, fed them, healed them, and protected them for 300 years. On the Zorvon homeworld, Prime Minister Galoth floated before his people and delivered the speech he had dreaded giving. Their star was dying faster than anyone had predicted. They had perhaps 15 years left, not 20. Without the human stabilization array, every Zorvan in the universe would die. We must find a way to reach the humans, Galoth said. Not just to ask for help, but to apologize. We voted against them. We joined with those who wanted to drive them away. This was wrong. We were wrong. And the crowd Zorvans wept. Their tears floated away in their water tanks, tiny bubbles of grief rising toward the surface. We were afraid of them, Galoth continued. We were afraid because they were different, because they were capable, because they helped us so easily when we could barely help ourselves. This fear made us forget everything they had done for us. It made us vote against our own survival. He paused, gathering his strength for what he had to say next. Now we must go to them with nothing but our honesty. We cannot offer them anything of value. We cannot threaten them with anything. We can only tell them the truth. We were wrong, we are sorry, and we need their help. Whether they choose to help us is entirely up to them. The Zorvans began to organize their own delegation. Across the galaxy, other species were doing the same. Ships were being prepared. Representatives were being chosen. Speeches were being written and rewritten. The galaxy was dying, and its only hope lay with the people it had rejected. The small Cathari ship limped across the border into human space. Its engines were damaged, its hull was scarred by weapons fire, and half of its systems were failing. The journey from Council space had taken 3 months instead of the expected 3 weeks. They had been attacked by pirates twice and had barely escaped a 9th hive. Patrol near the border. Aboard the ship were representatives from 23 different species. They had gathered one by one during the long journey, each adding their voice to the desperate plea for human help. Former High Counselor Zethman was there, stripped of his title and disgraced, but still alive. Dr. Hextall of the Cathari had come, carrying medical records of the plague that was killing her people. Chief Grower Meltek represented what remained of the Mycelian collective. Prime Minister Galoth floated in a portable water tank. The leader of a species facing extinction, Captain Laura Bennett, was on patrol. When her sensors detected the alien ship crossing the border, she was 32 years old. With dark hair cut short for practical reasons and calm brown eyes that had seen more than their share of hardship, her grandmother had served in council space before the withdrawal and had told her stories about the aliens humanity had once worked with. Laura ordered her crew to approach the alien vessel carefully. They had standing orders to turn away any ships from council space, but something about this situation felt different. The alien ship was barely holding together. It was not a threat. It was a cry for help. "This is Captain Laura Bennett of the human patrol vessel Steady Hand," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Identify yourself and state your purpose." The response came from Zethman himself. His voice was tired and broken, nothing like the proud High Counselor Laura had read about in history files. "Captain Bennett, I am Zethman of the Valari. I was once High Counselor of the Galactic Council. I am the one who organized the vote that drove your people away. I come now not as a leader, but as a beggar. We need your help. We have nothing to offer in return except our apology and our shame." Laura was quiet for a long moment. She looked around at her crew, seeing the same confusion she felt reflected in their faces. No one had expected this. "Stand by," she finally said. "I am contacting my superiors." For 3 hours, the alien delegation waited in silence while humans on distant worlds discussed their fate. Zethman sat in the ship's small common area, surrounded by representatives of species that had once been his allies or his enemies. Now they were all the same, survivors of a disaster they had caused themselves. Dr. Hextall judged him with something between anger and pity. "You organized the vote," she said quietly. "You convinced us to turn against the humans." "I did," Zethman admitted. "I was afraid of them. I was afraid of how much we depended on them. I thought that if we pushed them away, we would become stronger. And instead, we discovered that we were nothing without them. Our strength was borrowed strength. Our success was built on their labor. When they left, we fell apart." Prime Minister Galoth floated closer to them. "We all share the blame," he said. "We all voted yes. We could have voted no. We could have spoken up for the humans. Instead, we followed Zethman because it was easier than facing our own dependence." Meltek nodded in agreement. "The Mycelians are guilty as well. We took human help for granted. We never bothered to learn what they were teaching us. We assumed they would always be there." The ship's communications system crackled to life. Captain Bennett's voice filled the small room. "The delegation from Council Space has granted permission to dock at Station 14. You will be provided with food, medical care, and comfortable quarters. A representative from the United Human Worlds will meet with you tomorrow." The aliens looked at each other in shock. They had expected to be turned away. They had expected anger and rejection. Instead, the humans were offering them hospitality. Captain Bennett Zethman said carefully, "We do not understand. After everything we did, why are you helping us?" Laura's response was simple. "Because you need help. That has always been enough for us." Station 14 was a large orbital platform that served as the main port of entry for visitors to human space. The alien delegation was given quarters in a comfortable section of the station, with rooms adapted to each species' needs. The Zorvons received a water-filled chamber. The Mycelians got a room with controlled humidity and temperature. Everyone received food that was safe for their biology. During the 3 days they waited for the human representative to arrive, the aliens watched human society with new eyes. They saw humans helping each other without being asked. They saw strangers sharing meals together. They saw children playing games where the goal was cooperation rather than competition. A young human girl, perhaps 8 years old, noticed that Meltek was standing alone by a window. She walked up to him without fear. "You look sad," she said. "Are you hungry?" "My mom made extra sandwiches today." Meltek did not know how to respond. A child was offering him food simply because she thought he might need it. No one on the Mycelian worlds would do such a thing. Food was precious. You did not give it away to strangers. "That is very kind," he managed to say, "but I cannot eat human food." The girl nodded seriously. "Okay, but if you need anything else, you can ask me. My name is Amy." She smiled at him and walked away to join her friends. Meltek watched her go, his heart aching with a feeling he could not name. On the 4th day, the human representative arrived. His name was Kevin Palmer, and he was the Secretary General of the United Human Worlds. He was a middle-aged man, with gray hair at his temples and lines around. His eyes that spoke of long years of worry and work. He met with the alien delegation in a simple conference room. There was no grand chamber, no display of power. Just a table, some chairs, and a view of the stars through the window. "Thank you for coming," Kevin said as he sat down. "I have read the reports about what has happened in Council Space since our departure. I am sorry for your suffering." Zethman blinked in surprise. "You are sorry? We are the ones who drove you away. We are the ones who should apologize." "And I accept your apology," Kevin said simply. "But that does not mean I take pleasure in your suffering. No one should starve." No one should die of disease when treatment exists. No one should face extinction when the technology to save them exists. Dr. Hextall leaned forward. Then you will help us. Kevin nodded. Humanity will help you. We have already begun preparing medical ships, agricultural teams, and engineering corps. They will depart for Council space within the week. The room fell silent. The aliens had expected negotiations. They had expected demands. They had expected humans to ask for something in return for their help. What do you want from us? Galoth finally asked. Kevin looked at him with genuine confusion. I do not understand the question. What payment? What concessions? What must we give you in exchange for this help? Kevin smiled gently. It was the same sad smile that Ambassador Hart had worn years ago. We want nothing. We are helping you because you need help. That is the only reason. Zethman felt tears forming in his eyes. He had never cried before. The Volari were a proud people who considered such displays shameful. But now, faced with kindness he did not deserve, he could not stop himself. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. After everything we did? After the way we treated you? Kevin stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the stars, the same stars that had watched humanity grow from a primitive species on a single planet to a civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. Because cruelty is a choice, he said softly, and so is kindness. Every moment of every day we choose who we want to be. Do we want to be the kind of people who let others suffer because they wronged us? Or do we want to be the kind of people who help because helping is right? He turned back to face the delegation. Humanity chooses kindness. Not because it is easy. Not because it is rewarded. But because it is who we are. It is who we want to be. Dr. Hextall stood up slowly. We do not deserve this. Perhaps not, Kevin agreed. But that is not the point. Forgiveness is not about what people deserve. It is about who you want to become. We want to become the kind of people who can forgive. And so we do. The alien delegation sat in silence, overwhelmed by what they were hearing. Everything they thought they knew about power and relationships was being challenged. In their experience, the strong dominated the weak. The wronged took revenge. Kindness was a transaction given only in exchange for something of value. But humans did not think that way. Humans helped because helping was right. They forgave because forgiving was right. They chose kindness because kindness was who they wanted to be. Zethman realized in that moment why he had feared the humans. It was not their technology or their numbers or their influence. It was this simple, terrifying fact. Humans were better than him. They were better than any species he knew. And facing that truth was more painful than any defeat in battle. Teach us, he said quietly. Teach us to be like you. Kevin smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. That is all we have ever wanted to do. 5 years had passed since humanity departed the Galactic Council. Now human ships filled the skies of 100 worlds, but not as conquerors. They came as healers, builders, and teachers. The first human medical fleet arrived at the Cathari homeworld on a cold morning. Dr. Hextall stood on the landing platform watching the sleek white ships descend through the clouds. Each one carried doctors, nurses, medical supplies, and most importantly, a cure for the plague that had killed billions of her people. The lead doctor was a woman named Grace Cooper. She was young, barely 30, but she had graduated first in her class from Earth's best medical school. She had volunteered for this mission without hesitation. Dr. Hextall, Grace said as she stepped off her ship, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. I have studied your reports on the plague. We believe we can synthesize a cure within 2 weeks. Hextall took her hand carefully, still unused to the human custom. 2 weeks! We worked for a year and made no progress. Grace smiled kindly. You were working alone. We have the combined medical knowledge of 200 years of research. You will never be alone again. True to her word, Grace and her team developed a cure in 12 days. Within 6 months, the plague was eradicated from every world it had touched. Billions had died, but billions more were saved, on the mycelian worlds. Human agricultural teams worked alongside the survivors to rebuild the great fungal farms. They did not simply do the work themselves. They taught the mycelians everything they knew. They explained the science behind the fertilizers, the reasoning behind the rotation schedules, the methods for detecting problems before they became disasters. Chief Grower Meltek worked beside a human farmer named Tom Bradley. Tom was a quiet man with weathered hands and patient eyes. He had grown up on a farming colony and had learned agriculture from his parents and grandparents before him. Meltek asked one day as they walked through a field of young fungal stalks, "You could just do it yourselves. You could make us dependent on you again." Tom shook his head. "That was never our goal. We helped you before because you needed help, but we should have been teaching you all along. We should have made sure you could stand on your own. That was our mistake, and we will not make it again." "Your mistake?" Meltek was surprised. "We are the ones who voted against you. We are the ones who forgot everything you did for us. We are the ones who made it easy for you to forget," Tom replied. "We solved your problems so quietly that you did not even know they existed. We should have been partners, not caretakers. We are fixing that now." Meltek thought about this for a long time. The humans were not just saving his people. They were helping them become capable of saving themselves. This was a different kind of help, a deeper kind, in Zorvan space. The greatest engineering project in galactic history was underway. Human engineers had returned to complete the solar stabilization array that would save the Zorvan star. But this time, they brought Zorvan students with them. Every step of the construction was documented. Every technique was explained. Every piece of knowledge was shared. Admiral Laura Bennett oversaw the project from her flagship, the Steady Hand. She had been promoted twice since that day at the border, when she had welcomed the alien delegation into human space. Now she commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled, and her mission was not war but salvation. Her aide was a young Valari named Vexon. He had been the assistant to High Counselor Zethman during the darkest days of the collapse. Now, he worked alongside humans, learning their ways and helping to bridge the gap between species. Admiral Vexon said one evening, as they watched the construction crews work, "May I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you hate us? For what we did to your people?" Laura was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "When I was a child, my grandmother told me stories about serving in council space. She loved the aliens she worked with. She said they were good people who were simply afraid of things they did not understand. And what do you think? I think she was right. Fear makes people do terrible things. But fear can be overcome. Hatred can be healed. The fact that you are here, working beside me, proves that." Dexon looked down at his claws. "I still feel shame for what we did," good Laura said, surprising him. "Shame means you understand that it was wrong. But do not let shame become despair. Use it to become better. That is all any of us can do." The Galactic Council was dissolved by a unanimous vote, including the vote of the human representatives who had returned to participate. In its place, a new organization was born, the Galactic Cooperative. The cooperative was built on principles that humans had developed over centuries of painful lessons on their own world. No species would dominate another. Help would be given freely, without expectation of payment. Knowledge would be shared openly. Conflicts would be resolved through dialogue, not war. Secretary General Kevin Palmer presided over the founding ceremony. Former High Counselor Zethman stood beside him, not as a leader, but as a witness to what his mistakes had created and what human forgiveness had made possible. "We stand today at the beginning of a new era," Kevin said to the assembled representatives of 100 species. "An era built not on power or fear, but on cooperation and compassion. We have learned, all of us, that no species can survive alone. We need each other. And we are stronger together than we could ever be apart." On the Valari homeworld, statues were being erected. Not statues of conquerors or politicians, but statues of humans. Ambassador Samuel Hart, Captain Laura Bennett, Dr. Grace Cooper, Farmer Tom Bradley, and thousands of unnamed human helpers who had come to save the galaxy The same statues appeared on every world that had been saved. Each one bore an inscription in the local language. They could have let us fall. They chose to catch us instead. On Earth, a young girl named Megan Carter read about the statues in her history class. She was 12 years old, with curious eyes and an endless supply of questions. "Teacher," she said, raising her hand, "why did the humans help the aliens even after they were so mean to us?" Her teacher was an elderly man named Chris Abbott. He had lived through the departure and the return, and he had watched humanity become something greater than it had ever been before. "That is a good question, Megan. What do you think?" Megan thought about it seriously. Because we wanted to be good? Because being mean back would have made us just as bad as them? Chris smiled. "That is part of it. But there is something more. We help them because helping others is not a transaction. It is not something we do to get something in return. We help because that is who we are. That is who we choose to be, every single day. But what if someone keeps being mean? What if they never learn? Then we keep trying. We keep showing them kindness. We keep being the example of what is possible. Eventually, most people learn. Most people choose to be better. And the ones who do not, well, that is their loss, not ours." Megan nodded thoughtfully. She did not fully understand everything her teacher was saying, but she understood enough. Kindness was a choice. Forgiveness was a choice. And every day, you've got to decide what kind of person you wanted to be. 20 years later, Megan Carter would become the first human ambassador to the Galactic Cooperative. She would spend her life building bridges between species, teaching the lessons humanity had learned through centuries of struggle and growth. And when aliens asked her why humans were so willing to help, she would smile and give the same answer her teacher had given her so many years ago. Because that is who we are. That is who we choose to be. The universe had descended into chaos when humans left. Wars had raged. Plagues had spread. Species had faced extinction. All because the galaxy had forgotten the value of those who helped without asking for anything in return. But humans had not forgotten who they were. They had not abandoned their principles. They had waited, patiently and sadly, for the day when the galaxy would need them again, and when that day came, they had chosen kindness. They had chosen forgiveness. They had chosen to catch the falling instead of watching them crash. The stars still shone in the endless darkness of space. But now, scattered among them, there was something new. There was hope. There was cooperation. There was the stubborn, relentless compassion of a species that refused to give up on anyone, even those who had given up on them. The humans had returned, and the universe was better for it.